Hey guys, welcome back to the Milkhouse Homestead. I'm Brooke. I'm glad that you're here today. Today I'm sitting by my fire because it's nice and cozy and it's a little cold outside, and just a little change of scenery from the kitchen and other videos that I've done. But also I just wanted to go ahead and go over sourdough maintenance. I get these questions a lot, and I'm open to answering any questions that anyone else may have, so please leave those comments below and consider subscribing to my channel. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into that right now. I see this topic come up a lot, especially when I talk to other people about sourdough. They kind of just don't know, like even when I give friends like sourdough, they ask me a lot of questions, and I kind of just want to go ahead and just briefly dive into what that looks like in the maintenance of your sourdough. So currently I'm going to actually be pulling mine out of the fridge to reactivate it. It's already active, it's just when it's in the fridge, it's more dormant and it is slow to feed, versus if it was on the counter, it's going to feed really quickly, which is why if it is on the counter, you do need to feed it daily. So for me, unless I'm using my sourdough starter, I have it in the fridge and I'll feed it every 3 days. And then whenever, like currently I'm pulling it out now so I can show you guys kind of how I feed it and when I feed it, and then when I use it, because I do want, when I pull it out of the fridge to start feeding it, I do want it to feed for a couple days before I actually do use it for a recipe. And I'll still keep that discard. So when I pull it out of the fridge, I'm going to discard some. You want to discard some of your sourdough starter each time you use it. This is just a way to kind of discard some of it, and that way you can like re-add to it and replenish it, and it feeds on that new flour and that new water that you have added to it. For me, I like an equal hydration, so I do, if I'm doing 50 grams, I'm going to do 50 grams water, 50 grams of flour. Mine is a bread flour starter. I know there's a lot of different flours you can use based on your flavor profiles or your favorite flours. But for me, bread flour has been my go-to each time. So in this next video, you're going to see kind of how I feed my starter, what times of the day. I mean, it really doesn't matter what time of the day as long as it's every day. But I will feed it every day, sometimes every 12 hours, just when I know I'm about to use it, because when it does feed, you'll see where it rises and then you'll see it slightly collapse. And that's when you don't want to use it. You want to use it when it's at the height. So once it kind of collapses, it's kind of done feeding, and you'll probably want to go ahead and refeed and then use it before it does come down, which you'll be able to see because it'll be kind of a curve where it's still inflating because it's eating, and you'll see a kind of divot whenever it has kind of finished eating and starting to collapse, because you want to keep that active starter when you're going to use it. So now let me go ahead and show you guys visually what I'm talking about. This is my starter when it comes out of the fridge. And now I'm going to go ahead and discard, and there's this much left over. You don't have to worry about weighing what is left over, but typically there's whatever's in there. As long as you have a little bit in there, you should be okay. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add 50 grams of water and 50 grams of flour. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that I scrape the sides and mix it very well. You want to make sure that it is very well combined, just to make sure that there's no leftover flour that is residing inside of the container, but just also to make sure that it all gets scraped up from the bottom and that it's all being fed. Next, I'm just going to go ahead and wipe off the sides here of the residual. I just don't want my lid to get dried sourdough stuck to it, and then I can't open it, and that way it just stays nice and clean. Now I'm just putting it away into my bowl and then covering it with a dish towel and storing it for the next 12 hours until the next feed. And for me, I am only a family of 2. It's just me and my husband. So we don't eat a whole lot of bread or a lot of sourdough. So I don't need like bulks of the starter. I really just need that minimal amount that you see in that video that I just showed. And I don't like to waste either. So I do keep the discard each time I feed. So whenever you do that discard, I go ahead and keep it, store it in the fridge, and you can use that for sourdough waffles, scones, pizza dough, anything that you really want. It doesn't have the nutrients as dense as it would if it was an active starter, but there's still that flavor there, and I don't like to waste it, and it's really good. It makes any dish way better, so I recommend trying that out. I do want to try some recipes with you guys with the discard. The discard waffles are actually our top go-to in this household. My husband loves them. We'll pretty much have them every morning if I don't have other breakfast items. That's definitely a go-to. So whenever you do go to feed your starter, I typically, my rule of thumb is if I'm not going to be using it, but it's on the counter because I know I'm going to use it later this week, I do want to keep it active, so I will do a little, like 30 grams of water, 30 grams flour. That way it's just continually active, and I do feed it every day, but that way I'm also not wasting a product until I do need to go ahead and use it. Another thing is when I do go to use it, I will feed it more than that, depending on which recipe I need and how much sourdough sourdough starter you need to for that recipe. So usually it's typically 100 grams to 120, it just depends, but typically 100 grams. So I'll do 60 grams of water and 60 grams flour. Another question I do get a lot is, what do I store my sourdough in? So my sourdough is stored in a wax jar. Typically I like those just because they have the lid. Unlike the mason jars where you have to kind of screw it a little bit to keep it on, this one kind of like sits perfectly, and I can put it in the fridge. You don't want to like have it airtight because it is feeding, and I mean you can, but it could over and explode basically from all of the fermentation happening in there. So typically the wax jars are my favorite to use. I'll even use that for my discard and putting that in the fridge, and I don't need to seal it or airtight it at all. Some other maintenance I do with my sourdough starter is I will go ahead and get a clean jar, typically every week or 2 weeks. You'll start to see a buildup around the ring, and I just like to keep it clean. I try my best to wipe around the rim ever so often when I'm using it, just so the lid doesn't get stuck on it because it will dry and harden. And also the way you can tell if your starter is going bad is you'll see either mold growth, which if I did see that, I would definitely toss it. I recommend tossing it, but to each their own. And then also is, as long as you see those bubbles and it's active and it's doubling in size each time you feed it, you have a pretty good active starter. And if not, there are some ways to troubleshoot that. And one way that I've learned to troubleshoot a starter that's not growing is to go ahead and just not restart, but take a little bit of that starter, like as if you were doing a discard of your sourdough that you fed like the other day, and then just kind of replenish it, but like increase the amount that you are replenishing and see what happens there, and make sure that you're in a warm environment. You don't want it to be too cold. Also, I do like to use a heating mat. I use my seed grow mat, the heating mat, and that typically works very well. You can also use that when you're in a pinch and you want to use your sourdough starter that day. So I'll typically put my sourdough onto the heating mat and then put a pitcher on top of it just to hold the heat, and you'll see it rise. And typically that takes about 6 hours, maybe a little less, depending how much you fed it and how much you actually need of your starter. Another question I do get asked often is, what is sourdough starter? It is fairly new to me still. I love experimenting with it, and I've made really great breads with it. It is a fermented active culture. Basically it's replacing the yeast that you would normally use in a bread recipe. I still like to sometimes pick out a recipe that I really like that requires yeast, and I will just use sourdough starter instead of the yeast, and it kind of gives it a different flavored profile for sure, because it is a sourdough, so it is like that sour taste of a sourdough, and it kind of adds a good flavor to what you are making. But it is an active fermented culture, and it's basically replacing your yeast that you would use in baking. And it has a lot of great health benefits for your gut health, which is why I love using it. And also I just love the taste. It is one of my favorites. It may not be my husband's favorite. He typically, for some reason, loves the processed white bread, and I can't bring myself to eat that. I used to actually, but after figuring out how bad it is for you in the process of the bread making for that, I kind of have decided to make my own bread. Plus, we're not really huge bread eaters in this family, although I do really like to make the Hawaiian sweet rolls. I do like to make my own hoagie rolls. Another one of our favorites, or for mine, is the focaccia. I love making focaccia bread. And I just like a typical white farmhouse bread for sandwiches and grilled cheeses. So I will do that occasionally. And I also like to use it for croutons for my salads. I will go ahead and use bread that I've made and shred it up and put it in the oven to bake, to make croutons. But it's really good. I recommend trying that out. Another good way to use your sourdough starter is in making like sweet breads. We really like a cinnamon raisin bread or chocolate focaccia. Those are really good like sweet breads that you can try. I have made a chocolate focaccia before with some Nutella and strawberries and things like that. That was really good. I do recommend. So you can use sourdough not only for savory but sweet as well. I also like to make it with biscuits. I'll put sourdough in my biscuits and that tastes really good as well. The thing about sourdough is you just have to be intentional, and it does take time to get into a rhythm, to remember to feed that starter and kind of take care of it. The worst thing you could do is forget about it and it molds and then you have to start over. But typically that's not all bad either, but there are lots of sourdough starters out there that have been around for 100 years and things like that. You'll see different ages of it. And so those are just kind of like, as long as you take care of it, it will last you. So there's that. It's just, my rule of thumb is just every 3 days, if it's in the fridge and you're not using it, to feed it. If it's on the counter, every day, if not every 12 hours, if you're gonna actively use it. And don't throw away the good stuff. The discard's still good. I recommend trying some recipes with that. I can link some below and kind of give you my recommendations like I did with the waffles and things like that. I hope this video was helpful for you with your sourdough maintenance, and I am open to any comments or questions that you may have, and I'm so happy that you guys stopped by to see me today, and I hope this video was helpful. I do love sourdough. I love talking about it, so please leave comments or questions or anything like that, and please subscribe to my channel. And thank you guys as always for joining me today, and have a beautiful day.